Hi everybody, my name is Scott Yours, and I'm currently doing a multi-part series regarding the last several years of my life from 2018 onward. It's referencing a research tool called the Wolf and the Neural Network. And in this video, we're going to cover from about January 31st, 2020 to about August 6th, 2020. And inside of that, I'd like to start off with a story regarding Halifax Regional Police. I used to date this guy. He was a brown fella, beautiful brown man, beautiful, beautiful green eyes. And he had to go to Halifax Regional Police one day, and because he got scammed out of some money, and he'd come back home almost in tears. And I was like, what's wrong? And he's like, the way they treated him. And he's like, no, it's because I'm brown. He's like, you should have seen the way they looked at me. And me asking them, and they wouldn't help him, wouldn't do anything. And he was so upset by it. And I was like, do you want me to go and say something? Because I'll go and say something. He's like, no, you can't get targeted. Don't. They'll just come after you. Just don't. He's like, I've seen this enough. Just don't. And, yeah. So I'll just leave that there. So, where I left off was, we had just kind of finished up our recorded meeting at the shipyard, and I was waiting for a response. I didn't get a response, and I'm now sitting, wondering what's going on. So obviously I tried calling them after the 2 weeks. I was respectful, and I couldn't get a hold of Jody Posabot, the third-party HR. I did get a hold of Jordan, the director. He did send me an email back saying he knew nothing about a follow-up date, and that was it. He was just very respectful. And to that, Jordan, thank you very much, sir. I appreciate that. That was at least a little bit of dignity, and I very much appreciate that. And then I spoke with Jim Perrin, and I contacted him. I think it was like 8 o'clock or 7 or 8 o'clock at night. I don't remember, because I had to wait until after the 5 and then waited for just different time zones just to be as respectful as I could. And he'd said, I'm with my family right now. And I was like, hey, no, I completely understand, man. Just do your thing. Have a great night. And you contact me, just please, when you get back in the office if you can. And I don't believe he contacted me, and I had to contact him again 2 days later. For some reason, I feel like it was like a Wednesday. But I can't really, sure, I'd have to go look it up. And we spoke on the phone, and he said, well, he's not accountable. This is way above him. And I'm like, well, if you're not accountable, then why are you and I even having a discussion? And he talked about how respectful the meeting was, and I agreed. And that's why I said, why didn't somebody contact me? And, why are we at this point? And then he basically told me it all didn't happen, especially if I didn't give him names, and then tried to get names again. Right? And then I was like, this is and that's when he basically said all this stuff that was happening was just some narrative to get the police, right, to get him. And I had asked him, how do you feel, what if I went to speak to the police about my options here, right? I wasn't serious about it. I just wanted to know what he was going to say. And he laughs, and he's like, what are they going to do? Which is... right? But I just needed to understand his disposition in regards to this. And then he did mock me about talking about CSIS laws, right? And remember, I only signed a 6 or 7% and did a review and highlighted the actual laws and why it's probably applicable, especially given Canada's national shipbuilder. And I feel like, I don't know if he actually was thinking about it, but in that moment, I think it kind of clued in that maybe I'm right. Because I don't know why he would be acting like that. He's like, you really don't think people are watching you, do you? It's like a 6 or 7% chance. That's all that I put. And I never said anybody watching me or anything. And I walked into the CSIS nest. And it's like Canada's national shipbuilder. And the laws are right there in front of you. So, I mean... and it seems like you might have actually sent the police to come after me. So, I mean... And then you're sitting there saying it's all some narrative to get the police? Racism, all this stuff, me talking about these topics, it's all just some narrative to get the police. You want to talk about fixed delusions, my friends. That is a fixed delusion that the world revolves around them. Right? So we disconnected. I continued to do a couple reviews, again, more technical reviews. I focused on something I referred to as I didn't have a name for it, but it was a problem I was trying to solve for a few years. It was like the hierarchy problem. Given basically like a tree node. Why? And how would it update? And, I wanted to understand some more basic principles about this because I knew there was something there that, was deeper than I could use it. I knew how to use it all, but there's something else there. And I feel like it had something to do with like math and stuff that I just didn't understand. I didn't have the tools, and I was really interested in it. So I just kind of did like a pseudo version and talked about, because in the meeting they asked me did you find this stuff easy? And I don't have anybody to compare my skills to. So when I did my type up, I was like, look, I don't have anybody to compare to, but I find that stuff easy. And easy relative to whatever task, right? Like I'd have to be presented with a harder task, but I called it the problem and explained it out about, traveling different routes, and then there being problems at different routes. So then how do you relay that information back so that you always take the optimal route? Basically, so that the system can correct itself. And how fascinating I found such a thing, and I really wanted to understand it. And I refer to it as the hierarchy problem because it's kind of like a layout, like a book or like a hierarchy, or better said, is a tree model. And I just talked about it enough, and then I kept reiterating, like, look, I should be talking to the person in charge. This was really bad. All the reviews with Jim, the reviews with Jody, they objectively failed. The harassment and stuff did happen. So now we're at a point, you got the person who's supposed to be doing this investigation telling me they're not accountable and it's way above them. So who's way above? The main security guy for J.D. Irving. That's right. This is right at the top of J.D. Irving. Or right at the top of somewhere. I don't know. And that's why you'll notice me referring to person right at the top, because, it wasn't the first time that I'd heard that. So, that's a way of talking directly to that individual, whomever that is, or individuals, without actually mentioning a name or anything like that, and using their own verbiage so that, it should be very safe. So whenever you see that kind of reference, that's why I did it. It was protection for both sides. I didn't want to slander anybody, and it was to talk about them using the idea of this magical person or whatever. And, right, so it's basically to use that just as description, and it became very, very reliable and very, very powerful. So, by about, so statement day should have been February 10th, 2020. They didn't do anything. So now we're going to jump forward to February 14th, 2020. On this day, they removed terms I mentioned in the recording meetings from some of their job postings. Specifically, deleting terms. I sent the director an immediate email. I said, hey, XXXXX, I need you to do me a huge favor as soon as possible and without question. This will help build trust between us. Asking him to please go and check them himself, because they're changing the terms in these. And they're not contacting me. They're lying about contacts. They're lying about all this. They're lying about the harassment. And here they are now deleting terms because they were terms that were from my work. Now, it wasn't like completely direct, but it was like very much the essence of it. But my manager told me definitely were not required. And it's like now they're being used in these job postings that seem to be relating to jobs that might be relating to me. And I'm like, is this bait? Was them trying to say, hey, Scott applied for this? I don't know. And I don't like the idea of that. That's why I like somebody to talk to me. You know what I mean? But, they did try to delete them. I made note of it. I contacted the people. There is a record of it. You can say, oh, Scott, no, they didn't. This. Okay, fine. But the facts are they did. I can only offer evidence. And, I'm getting no contact from anybody, no contact. So by February 21st, 2020, I made PIPED requests. Now, this is Canadian privacy law at the federal level, and I actually used the official template. I'd been asking before that a little bit, saying, look, well then, if you're not answering, I want my data, I want to know who's seen it, I want these different types of things, because that's the only way we're going to be able to deal with this, or make this fair. And nobody was contacting me. So I did use the official template right from the Privacy Commissioner of Canada's website on that date. And then on February 25th, 2020, they closed the case. And it says, there's several important points here. I am going to basically read the gist of the email because it's important. And this would have came from their VP of HR, Jim Rainey. So like I said, there were VPs, there were directors, there was Jim Perrin, who was like the physical security manager, and all. Like he said, this goes way above him. So all these people are involved, including the different levels of government and the defense minister. It's an objective point at this point. And this is going to be very, very important for when we move forward to August 2022 when they falsely arrested me. Right? Because all these players are involved in a serious way. I did ask on December 9th, 2019, that it be forwarded to the Canadian government. And so it would have been forwarded to the provincial government, and this would have definitely directly been with Stephen McNeil. And reasonably, since Harjit Sajjan was involved, the defense minister, and I was emailing, because when I emailed D&D, I addressed it to Harjit Sajjan. So reasonably, at this point, the Prime Minister may be involved, or at least these high-level parties. I had no clue that Harjit Sajjan had also was involved with this whole EMIC thing. Right? So there's a high level of these people knowing what's going on. I know nothing. I'm just some dude. Right? But it's extremely reasonable to state that all these other people know what's going on, especially given the fact that I walked in there and dominated them in that recording meeting. Now you've got these issues about racism and everything, and you got some guy who's not backing down, but I'm being completely respectful. Just asking over and over, please have someone contact me, have someone contact me, have someone contact me. And, you know, when I spoke to Jim, this is important, he said, you were never meant to speak to Jody. It's like, well, why did you fish me with her card? Why would you put me in a room with her? It was all to suppress information, and I imagine built some sort of narrative probably about me. I don't really know. I would assume that's probably what they would try to do, you know, try to lock down all the information, control it, say I was this or that, and then that would tie in again with what they would try to do later on, try to say there was something wrong with me because of my mother's mental illness, which is like, it doesn't even make sense. Anyways. So I'm going to read on the closing date what Jim Rainey said, because it's really important, I think, from a legal perspective. First off, he said, we also reviewed all of the email submissions that you sent commencing your complaint. So no, they confirmed that, didn't they? Which is going to be really powerful in the end, because then it's going to be, how didn't you know? How didn't you know? And it says you have not provided any credible evidence of fraud or breach of the Canadian Criminal Code. Well, it's like, I didn't know that's exactly what we were looking at and talking about, but you know. Okay, I mean, you might want to review the evidence now because something real bad did happen. And how could I talk if I'm being targeted like that and then all these corrupt people? And I don't know. Seems awful convenient. As a result of our internal review, we have concluded that there was no instance of harassment directed towards you by XXXX. Now listen, there was. There was. Every employee listening to this, they're like, yeah, it was. It was. Scott dealt with it. Shouldn't have had to deal with it. Many others dealt with it. Yeah, there's probably utility in it. And yes, he was a really smart person. But it did happen. Now, it let off near the end, and there were just some minor incidents where I had to be like, no, you just got to stop it. But it was, we dealt with it. Right? But it was bad. It was bad, bad, bad. Okay. And here's important, right? Because it says the one instance that you raised in April 2019 was investigated, and it was determined that XXX would benefit from a coaching session, which was held shortly thereafter. You have not provided any credible evidence of fraud nor a breach of the Canadian Criminal Code. Right? So what's important here is note how they says the one instance you had raised in April 2019. So I'd actually raised a separate instance, like something was going on in my last day again, but I felt like I was being terrorized, and I indirectly made not statements about it, but took actions that like something is still going on, because because they told me if I say or do anything, I would just be fired. So and now if I go and I say anything or complain, I'll just be fired. So how could I? That's what they told me. So what a disingenuous thing to say to somebody, right? But most importantly here is, remember I said I think I made my complaint about April 10th, and within 9 days, police unmarked vehicle points me out of traffic. And then on that same day, you've got HRP and RCMP talking about the need for additional transfers, which would be Jim Perrin. So, I mean, if you doubt when I made it, he's saying it right here. So, I mean, you can say, Scott, what's coincidence? Okay, good, but the events did happen. That suspicious set of events with those specific set of individuals whom just happened to get my wallet and then just happened to get to J.D. Irving and then just happened to be the investigators investigating this is being confirmed basically in this statement. So, it kind of takes my story back and gives it a little bit more of credibility, at least in terms of the timeline and what I'm talking about here. And I did ask about PIPEDA, and he said that they're not federally regulated or all of this stuff. And I'm like, that doesn't super make sense considering their warships and stuff. And but anyways, I'd asked about the references on file, and he provided me with a letter. And this is super important because in the recorded meeting, they kept trying to get me to say I was an engineer. And I'm not an engineer. I do software engineer. I'm an analyst, right? Like I can write software. I wish I had more experience. I would have loved it. I'm good at fixing logical problems and stuff like that, like really good at it. And I love it, and I take pride in it, and I would be the best that I could possibly be. I would learn from every single person that I could, right? That's the kind of person that I am. I love it. I love learning. I love education, but I'm not going to go in and try to pretend to be something that I'm not. Right? I am capable and I can work with those individuals. We can have like really good discussions, and they can try to relay what they want or they need to me. And I can act as that intermediary to, now put that in code and allow them to assess what their skills are. Say, no, that equals what we would say it would equal, right? And get their buy-in or their sell-in or whatever, and say, no, that makes sense. It doesn't seem to be doing what we need it to do, and that right? And it was so bad that Jim was trying to get me to call myself an engineer that Jody had to be like, no, you're not going to get this guy, right? And this isn't a recording, and it's another reason I want this recording. Right? He didn't do it nastily, but he did it trickily and sneakily, and I knew what he was doing, and I'm just like, what are you doing? And, right? So what they did was they gave me this letter that says I was an engineering technologist. Now, they're trying to call me a fraud, a phony, right? They're telling me I'm lying about this harassment. Obviously, they were stalking me, the veiled threats about my mother, going after my cousin and all this different stuff. These people are evil. They're monsters, right? So what they're hoping I do now is I post that on LinkedIn, or they fish me with a job and I use it and they can say I'm a fraud claiming I'm these things that I'm not. So like that letter is completely useless. And you'll note this is a good point because the role I applied for was back-end system support. And that's right in the job posting. So you kind of see what point I'm trying to make here, right? It does seem like it was being used to fish, but, whatever, I kind of was just like, obviously, that's what these people were going to do. They know I beat them. Anybody looking at this would know I absolutely beat them. Like, spanked them. And, so I'm just going about my life, I'm like, hey, something bad kind of had happened and stuff, and, like, I was upset about it. I really didn't like that they mocked the racism and harassment. Like, I really, really, really did not like that. Like, I mean, it bothered me to the core because I am the kind of person that does say something about that kind of stuff, and I've lost friends. They went and told horrible stories about just awful human beings, right, that can't face themselves. It's like, okay, if you want to talk like that, then own it. Say that's who you are. Don't go and then try to hide it because you know it's bad, because then you're just doing it to try to seem like a big man or a big hero when you think the right kind of people are looking or the right kind of people aren't looking. It's like, don't be like that. Don't be like that. Right? And listen, I said more than my own share when I was a young man. We just were like ignorant little fucks. We would say horrible shit and laugh about it. We'd say horrible shit about each other and laugh about it. Right? We were just like horrible shit. Didn't matter if you were a colored person or however you want to term that. You know what I mean? It's like we'd make fun of people. And it's like I felt like after I got out of Ecom I'm like, oh my God, I would smack myself so hard. But we were raised like goddamn animals out here. Like animals, goddamn animals. So, I mean, the fact that any of us turned out to be able to use a toilet, I'm kidding, obviously, but it's kind of, you see what I'm getting at, right? So that I understand also then that, it requires change. People aren't just hateful monsters. They say stupid shit, and that isn't all that they are. And it's easy to want to just break them down to that, right? Because then you can take your anger out, your frustrations on that single person in these few words that they say. And, it's hard. But then the events with George Floyd happened. And the moment I seen that guy's face, that "do you know who I am" face with his neon, I knew that something bad was gonna happen. Those other officers doing nothing about it. Him crying on the ground for his mother over a $20 bill, and kids seeing it, the world seeing it. It was an execution. It was an execution. And yes, it was of a black man, but I know they do it to other colored people. It was that "I'm the big man, you see what I'm going to do?" And we're going to talk about that throughout, because you'll see the different incidents running with the police that they take that disposition. That it's like not human dignity, it's just about how big of a man they are, the big boy pulling their pants up. And it's like, they're not all police are like that at all, and that's not my view, but it's those dirty ones who do get in there, and since they're so prone to violence and crudeness, they're the ones who get escalated through the ranks, right? Because they're the ones who will just listen and sit back. They won't lose sleep over something like the murder of George Floyd at all. Even if they were right there and part of it, they'd go home and sleep like a baby, because they can't possibly believe they were ever involved in anything like that, right? That's the issue in policing, that you can get people with that cognitive dissonance, that they can't understand that. But they would blame anybody who was even 1% related to another event. They would try to have them charged or whatever related to something. That's a dangerous kind of human being, and that's one of the problems with policing, is that you get that type of mentality in there. And I'm sure from a psychological perspective there is a name for that. But, I'll leave that up to them to go through that. So, I watched that happening, and I talked with my family and stuff, and I just know. And I watched what was happening in the world. I watched people on my Facebook, black friends and stuff, act terrified. I've never seen them act like that. And it was terror. It's terror. And this is what I was warning the shipyard about. Right, about getting sued for something like this. You're not seeing what's happening in the world. You really don't realize people are done with this. And it's at a tipping point. And I tried to warn them. Right? So I was already thinking, I went and got paint and stuff. I got cardboard signs. And I live 40 kilometers away from the police station. I'm like almost 200 kilometers outside of the city. I can't, and we're in the middle of COVID. Right? If my mother gets COVID, she's going to die. Right? She's going to die. No ifs, ands, or buts, she's going to die. I can't go in there marching with a whole bunch of people. One extra guy from Ecum Secum, and then bring that back here, and then my mother, it's no. So I'm like saying, what can I do? So I made some signs. It said, "Black Lives Matter," and "I can't breathe." And I held the Black Lives Matter sign. I put "I can't breathe." And I went up to we call the corner, which is like a paved area, and I was well off the road. There, I was not bothering traffic. I was not interfering with anything. I wasn't bothering anybody. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't doing anything like that. But I did stay up there and protest for 5 hours. I just held my sign like this at the different directions as the cars going by. And it was up to them to make their decision on how to react, right? And I will tell you, a lot of people beeped. I would say 80 to 90% of people showed a very strong positive support, and they laid on that horn. Just beep, 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 like, yep. And there were some people who wouldn't even look at me, right? It's like, I know I see you, and you see me, I know. Funny. But I'm not really judging, right? Because some people have their own views as well, obviously, right? And that's not what I was there for. I was there for discussion and to bring awareness to an issue that's, close to my heart, and one that I know does exist. And I never once talked about J.D. Irving. And I'm going to give you a general sense about, like, some of the people who stopped that day. The first guy thought I was selling smoked mackerel. He said, "Lord Jesus, I thought you were selling smoked mackerel." I was half excited. And then I know this fella, and I know him to really speak his mind. When you're out here, there's a lot of people that really say what they're thinking. And this fella definitely says what he is thinking. I have heard him say some thinking things. And He said, I'm going to tell you something, young fella. I'm like, okay, it's going to be good. He said, they hate them. I said, what? Who? What do you mean? He said, the police. They hate black people. And it ain't ever going to change. They hate them. They want to hate them. I was like, and he's like, you know somebody probably going to kill you up here? You know how bad it still is out here? He's like, I'm coming back up to check on you in a couple hours to make sure nobody did anything to you. I said, well, thank you. Didn't expect that. And then throughout, a bunch of different people did stop. And it was all positive. Not one person stopped to harass me. You know, like, some people did mention White Lives Matter. I'm like, you're right. They absolutely do. And all lives matter absolutely do matter. And the way I talked about it was like, I wasn't out there to argue or do anything like that. I was out there to bring awareness to the, this issue, and saying that, right now, this group of people saying, like, we need help. Not that they need help, that they need help for white men. It's like that they need support. And that the support's the way to end that. And I compared, just saying like, hey, if your kid was going to school and they were 2 times more likely to be picked on, or 3, 4, 5, 6, say 6 times more likely to be picked on, you'd have a problem with that, wouldn't you? You'd be going into that school and saying something, right? They're like, yeah, I absolutely would. And I'm like, that's all that I'm saying here, is that the numbers are showing exactly that. And that it's being disproportionately directed towards black people or other minorities. And I said there are other factors that can contribute to that, but as of right now, it's being used as a tool of terror, and these people are asking, like, look, please stop this kind of behavior, right? They're terrified right now. They're terrified of the police. I can see it in my Facebook. I can hear my friends talking about it. There's absolutely no trust, right? And if we fix this, help them fix it, then it's going to fix it for your kids. It's going to fix it for me. It's going to fix it for you. And they were just like, weren't expecting that kind of an answer. I think they were thinking maybe I'd be a little bit combative, but absolutely wasn't, right? Like, I was super happy up there the whole day, super respectful. You'll note that I got a real bad sunburn. I'm super white. If the sun gets on me for 10, 15 minutes, I'm getting burned. It's awful. It's awful. But I got a real bad sunburn. I stayed up there for 5 hours. I didn't notify anybody I was going. Several people had asked and wished that I did notify, because they said they wanted to join. Like, they said, I would have came up here with you. And I'm like, I wanted to do this by myself, and I really appreciate that sentiment. It's good to know that, so many people were so supportive, and they're at that stage in their life where they're also like, no, I'm sick of it. Because enough people out in Ecom have seen enough of it and heard enough, and they don't know what to say. They don't know how to start stories or start conversation. Right? But I can guarantee you that night they had conversations. And you could say, well, and the lack of conversation says something. But then they also get to see the people around them be hateful and be like, wow, these people actually are monsters. Some of them are monsters. Right? And then some of them get to see themselves. Right? They can't just turn the TV off. They had to see me up there at that corner. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like the conversation was had. And I wanted to make sure that anything I contributed to, you know what I mean? There's the least that I could do is make sure that a conversation was had. Now, during this process, 2 police cars showed up. Now, remember, I'm 40 kilometers from a police station, and they drive by, they drive up, the cop comes and parks at the top of the hill, the other guy keeps driving back and forth like this. It eventually gets so awkward, there's people there with me, that he has to stop. Now, the people who were there with me were like, Scott, they're trying to get you alone. Why are they acting like this? Like, they were scared. They're like, why are they doing this? And I'm like, listen, it's all right. I'll deal with these people. Just go so they don't. And they're like, no, are you stupid? We're not leaving. They're going to do something to you. That's very clearly what they're trying to do. And so the officer eventually stopped, and I walked over to the officer, and he's like, oh, I wanted to see your other sign. And I said, oh, it says I can't breathe, because I kept that one just setting up against my car, right? And I had my dog there with me, right? And we're way back off of the road. My dog's super well behaved. He's the goodest of good boys. And immediately then says, well, I hope you know we're not like that. And I was like, well, I never said that you were, and I don't think that you are, and that's not why I'm out here today. I'm out here to show support for this, and that includes to any of the officers who see anything going on and you feel like you need to report it. I know I might not seem like much, man, but if you need to report something, I'm here for you. I will support you, and I will respect you. And I can tell you by the number of beeps that we're getting from this community that the majority of this community will support you as well, and that they're done with that. They're done with it. They don't want to hear about this racism stuff anymore. They're done with it. They want the police to deal with this. They're sick of it. They agree there's a problem. And it's like, I'm just out here to say that there's support. I'm not out here to judge you or anything like that. And he's like, wow, I didn't expect that for an answer. And it's like, right? Because I was not combative. I was nothing like that. I was out there to be respectful, to talk, engage, understand the different points of view so that I can better communicate with people, so that we can try. So we can try to communicate on these issues so we can get them fixed. And so if the 2 cop cars take off. Now, what's really concerning about that is, you know, I had a run-in with a police officer again back, I think it was in 2018, and where they stalked me out of my sister's driveway because I'm a gay bro. And, you know, when I was about to leave, was like, hey, what's going on? He's like, oh, nothing. And, you know, he was in his plain clothes, and I knew what it was, right? You know what that is, right? When somebody's being racist or they're being homophobic, they can't hide it like that. Like, it was just like, it was like a sick instinct going off in this person's head. And because they're like religious fanatics and stuff, and it's like, so, and then at one point his police vest was found in an extremely sketchy location. So I've already got like major red flags about this person, and I'm still trying to find out from RCMP if they're one of the ones who stalked me that day. But given that I was on the Sheet Harbour side of RCMP, that would seem to be as coming from Sheet Harbour RCMP. And again, 2 cars 40 kilometers away on that day. But on that same day, you'll note that a journalist did show up, and it was from Guysborough Journal. Her name would be Janice Christie, and she was insistent on doing an article. And like I said, I didn't do any media or anything like that, or social media about it. And I was like, no, that's not. I'm not here for that. And I was kept like walking around her. She's talking to me just to make sure people see my signs, right? And she's like, no. She's like, I understand that, right? She's a very sweet lady. Very, very kind lady. Very, very kind lady. And she does a lot for the community and stuff. I have to respect her for that. And she's like, listen, can I please just get a picture of you holding your sign and with your dog, right? So me and my boy Hawk are holding the sign in front of my car so you can see it. And she's like, if you do choose to want to do a story, just contact me. Just contact me. And, you know, so, and then she kind of takes off, and I just want to tell one more story about that day, and just to kind of give you the sense about people's feelings out here is, my mother and my aunt came to visit me to check on me to see if I was all right after a couple hours. And I will never forget the look on my aunt's face. She had married a black man. She went through a lot out here in Ekamseekam because of it. And when she seen me, I watched her put her head in the air, like, proud. If even for that moment, she was proud for herself, she knew it was the right thing to do. And it wasn't about me. It was about I think it's hard to explain, but if you could see it, you would know what that was. It was like that feeling you can hold your head high and take a nice deep breath. When you hear about people being afraid to get up in the morning because of who they are, no. That was the opposite of that. That's what you want everybody to feel. And so anyways, you know, the day ended. I went home and my family's like, Scott, no, you have to do the article. You have to do the article. You have to do it. You have to do it. Doesn't matter about your other side stuff. Like, we know who you are. And these have been things that have been true to you for a long time. I've talked about it with my exes and stuff. Because, like I love all colors. All kinds of people. Chinese, brown, black. I mean, like, I think they're all beautiful. I love men. Beautiful men. And, I'd gone through enough. I've seen enough, you know. I said enough when I was a kid. And, you know, I know that there's a point when we all need to face what reality is. And I mean, that's on all sides, because hate comes from all sides. It's not just a white thing. And anybody who sits there and says white guilt, white hate, it's like, Don't play that with me. There's things that are called respect, and then taking and playing that card all the time is not respect, right? There's the right thing to do sometimes, and there's lots of people out there that would never come and help me, who would sit there and say he's just a white boy and all this different stuff, and we know that, right? So it's about what individually you do in your heart and hoping that those individual actions all add up into a positive effect and a net change for everybody. And I think that it was a response, and it was my right to do an article. So I did, and I didn't mention J.D. Irving at all. And I never mentioned it to anybody that day. I never mentioned it to the journalist. Nothing like that. I gave my pure feelings on the subject. And then so that would have been June 10th, right? So I was protesting June 10th. These officers and stuff show up. Then by June 17th, the newspaper article went live on the Guysborough Journal website and got sent out. And on that day, my records show that's the day that my internet got cut to my house for 2 days. Hard cut. Required a technician to come and fix it. And so that's really interesting. And now, at that time, I'm like, I don't know, right? I just assigned that a 1%. Seriously, something seems like it's probably going on. My face popping up in this newspaper article. I didn't know about Postmedia, all these people being involved. I had no goddamn clue. I had no clue. I don't know. I just did what I thought was right, what was in my heart. So, you know, around the same time, I want to be fair to all sides, because you'll be like, oh, this is just a race thing to go after this, and it's like, no. At the same time, I had some very candid discussions online with people about, because there were some people saying that black people can't be racist, or other, and it's like, no, they could be racist. Racist is a human disease. That's hate. It's inside all of us. And if you're saying you're a color and so you can't be racist, that's racist. You're a racist. Right? Now you can look at it and say, you can go through the mechanisms of systemic racism and then say that, like, it's very difficult for certain groups of people to be systemic racist, and it's like absolutely true. Right? Absolutely 100% true. And that systemic racism was a massive factor in Canada, as was individual racism. But then to try to just say that because I'm black or because I'm white or because I'm Asian I can't be racist, that's bullshit. That is the myth. Right there, you hurt your argument so bad, right? So I did have these conversations online, and like the people who attacked me, I couldn't believe it. Like, they went right to, oh, you're just a straight white man, you don't know, couldn't possibly know. Like, I'm gay, and I went through a lot of shit as a kid, and like, if you see all the stuff I did and said about racism and stuff before this, and the hits that I took, just watching them degrade me just because of the color of my skin, and then them saying they couldn't possibly be racist, as they're trying to use those systems now to destroy me, to come together. It's fascinating. And in fact, I'm going to do a whole special episode just on that, because I find it so fascinating, and it's like, it's really amazing to watch that. And I'd like to know what it actually is called, because I'm not educated in those terms, but I know that somebody would be able to tell me what their reaction was and why they acted like that, and there must be a name for it, because it wasn't right and it wasn't decent. It was just like, it was hate. It was hate. They found somebody they thought they could hate, and they did it, and it's like, that's no different than anybody else. And I find that absolutely fascinating, especially because they were quoting Jane Elliott, you know, who did the blue-eyed student thing in her class, and it's like, because they were told they were colored people, they can't be racist, they turned into monsters, and they couldn't see that they were doing exactly what they were like. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. And absolutely fascinating, and absolutely required. I'm glad that I did it, even though these people just like horrified me and attacked me and lied. And I mean, what an experience to watch that happen. And it certainly gave me greater sympathy for, you know, the police in some instances, but also the politicians, and who are ultimately going to have to deal with this. So, you know, I'm like, okay, like something bad happened, you know, they came after me, all this different stuff, mocking all of this, you know, I was attacked. Now I don't have anything, I can't get a job anywhere, because like these people are reasonably going to target me. Now if I get a job, how can I get anything to do with these shipbuilding contracts unless somebody contacts me and says we're good? And remember, I said dozens of times I would sign something and just walk away. But I needed to know because I knew something bad happened. But nobody contacted me, nobody contacted me, nobody contacted me. Now, so I start to get my letter ready, and my letter that I would have ultimately sent on August 5th, 2020, and I would have had my letter done definitely by July 27th, I believe. That's like the last edit date or something I seen in one of them, but it was probably done before that. And listen, I told nobody about this, and I'm a nobody, so nobody should know anything about this. And I made sure that so these people could watch for leaks and cracks, because if this got out, can't be me. I'm just some gay bro from the sticks. I ain't selling no story. No, I wouldn't do anything like that. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Me trying to report something like this? Stupid. Any police officer not to see that, you're dumb. You're a dummy. You're a fucking dummy. Straight up dummy. You're a waste of resources. Dumb. So anyways, I get my letter ready to go, and it's on August 5th, 2020. And, you know, so my internet had got cut off before that and stuff. And so I send my letter. And you can ignore all this Pipita stuff because I got that really tuned, really, really beautiful document done from that. I just tried to hit as many points as I could. But what you'll notice, the personal letters to the individuals and asking them, like, look, what do you think now? Don't you wish you would have said something? When does this kind of behavior end? You know, when I talk like that, I talk to Jody because she's part of like these different young women's groups and like these different like groups that help the community, which is fantastic, Jody. But in the end, these people are going to turn to you to put your foot down and say something about these topics. They're going to look to you to show strength in these topics. They're going to look to you to see what you're going to do. And what did you do in this case? You buckled and then told me I was the problem. You know what's wrong with that, right? What are you going to tell them young girls, them young black girls, them young brown girls, young Asian girls? What are you going to tell them? That it doesn't exist? There's nothing you can personally do about it? No. That type of lying to yourself and lying to the community and lying to the world, it has to end. Right? You'll see I spoke to Jim Perrin saying, look, man, you messed up in some bad ways. Some of the worst ways a person can mess up. Right? But you can make this right. I know there's something that you can do. You know there's something you can do right now to make this right. It's not too late. It's never, listen, anybody watching this, you might have done bad shit, you might have said bad shit, but it's never too late. It's never too late to just say no. Never, okay? Ever. It's never too late. And you'll note that I spoke right to, you know, just like the director and Jim Rainey and stuff, talking like, look, you didn't see this? Now what are your feelings on this? Right? What has happened and talked historically about, like, you know, it's probably in a different letter, about what happens when you take away people's rights like that. You know, and I was like very like educational about it and on point about it. And, you know, I talked to these individuals, but right with the person right at the top, you'll note that, like, I was like, you didn't think I'd get this close, did you? Not that it was something I was trying to do. I couldn't make up these race issues. I couldn't make up them choosing Jim Perrin. They chose to associate me with the Wortley Report and those people and these race issues, not me. Okay? And they would have bet against me. And of course, that when on June 10th, it looks like, man, they were trying to stalk me, probably to try to say that I'm crazy, to lock me up in a mental institution because of my mother's mental illnesses, which is consistent with the night dress thing, with them happening to know the letters coming on the 19th of November, 2019, my internet security tests, my internet cutting out now when this thing goes live, me reporting being followed, right? And this is only some of the things that I'm including. So anyways, you see, like that I said, you know, you will yield now, or I will strap a collar on your neck and parade you through the streets howling. Now, That's because I was directly talking about their dominance levels in terms of animals, in like tigers and sharks, you know, each with their own specific skill set, which makes them dangerous in their own way. But the most important thing is when they smell blood, and why these people are acting like this is because if one person smells blood in the water, they don't know who they're going to get. One of them's going to jump them. Like, I mean, in like a professional way, in that like contest. That's all, and it was completely, absolutely contextual. And then you'll see I howled, which was the irony of calling me a dog, yet I was so right about the technical, all this different stuff, but I'm just a little dog, and I was treated like a dog. And you'll see that go back to the verbiage on December 10th, and how many times, and to that, I did try to resolve this many times before that, right? So it's like, a lot of this stuff is in context. There was no physical, nothing like that. I've never been in a fist fight with somebody. Like, I've never threatened anybody. Like, you can go through all my messages. Never. I'm not that kind of person at all. I don't like that. Like, it just, ew. I don't understand why people have to be like that. Like, me watching the news, I'm shocked every day. I'm like, man, I can't believe those kinds of monsters exist. Like, what happens to people? Right? So I send my letter, and just before that, I talked to a family member. I'm like, look, something obviously is going to happen. I don't have family support. I don't have, I don't have anyone. Right? And I'm scared these people are going to use it against me, and I know something big's going to happen, and I just needed to be prepared, so I'd waited a few days, right? And then I sent my letter August 5th, 2020, and then the next day, Stephen McNeil resigns. Now, I want to see if I can find the direct article here, okay? It says, Nova Scotia Premier Stephen McNeil resigns, says he is leaving politics. The announcement caught many off guard, as McNeil previously said he expected to attempt a third term. McNeil only advised the caucus of his decision earlier in the day. Right? He said he was going to, I think, resign back in April. But, you know, COVID happened. And, you know, there's a lot going on in the world. And I also need... So, anyways, anybody in my position now, seeing that happen the next day, knowing all these people are involved, you would rationally think that that's involved. Many people... My mom's like, obviously that's involved. Right? I spoke to a friend, and they're like, Scott, that's involved. And I'm like, oh, no, I can't treat it like that because they'll call me crazy. So I gave it a 1%. And ultimately, when I got falsely arrested and they locked me up, they called me crazy for signing that at 1%. Monsters. You wait till we get to that part of it. You're going to learn what a real monster is. And it ain't Scott yours, I'll tell you that. So I want to talk about the McNeil thing, but I want to talk about an event that happened just before that that's really interesting, because several days before that, on June 30th, two events happened. Remember my internet getting cut off? I said my letter was definitely fully ready about 3 days before this, but now Kevin McCoy goes on CTV News and is talking with Steve Murphy about the ships being done, him being a proud daddy. Right? I have no doubts, man, you make ships. I'm not saying that's easy. I'm not judging you for that at all. I'm judging for whatever the hell happened with this behavior. That's what I'm judging about. I don't care about your work. I don't care if you're involved. I don't care. But that kind of behavior, I got a problem with it. Right? But you'll also note that this article was hosted on CTV Edmonton. Again, back towards like where Jason Kenney and those guys would be in the whole Postmedia garbage going on. Just a side note, right? But what's also interesting is on this same day, July 30th, is that David Fraser and Darren Lauer release a video. Now, David Fraser is a well-known, real good, top privacy lawyer in Canada, and he works for McGinnis Cooper in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Sorry, guys. Sorry, David. You know I'm trying, right? Darren Lauer, he hosts a YouTube series called The White Hatter. Now, Darren Lauer was a police officer for several years, for quite some time actually, out in Vancouver. And I tried to find some relationships with him and anybody, and the closest I could find is Harjit Sajjan was a police officer out in Vancouver. area as well, but they were disconnected by quite some point. I couldn't really find any connections there. But he does say it just so happens to get David Fraser on the show. And David Fraser would ultimately, when I contact him in August 2021, just to ask about PIPEDA, he immediately states he's a conflict of interest. Right, so now you've got these, Kevin McCoy releasing this video with CTV on the same date that David Fraser and Darren Lauer are now talking about privacy stuff, right? And then David Fraser saying he's a conflict of interest later on. And then I send my letter, and, 5-6 days later, and then boom, the Premier resigns the next day. So you can see where the connections start to come in here. Now, what I really want to make sure that I point out here is that, like, I super respect David Fraser, and I do want to say, like, throughout the process, that regardless of who he's involved with, this or that, it does seem like his company had a contract with the government, or I think it was Procurement Canada, so he may not have been able to speak to this based on who it was involving, or maybe they'd contracted him. I don't know. Right, but I do want to say that David Fraser has consistently been one of the kindest people throughout this process, and even if our opinions don't match and, he doesn't agree with me, I still want to make sure that that's known so that he's given the credit that he deserves in that. So now we're at this point, where the Premier's kind of like stepping down and everything. I've got this letter. Obviously, this is very stressful. That day was like very stressful. I held myself together, I thought, really well, but, there was a lot going on in there. And there's a lot more inside of this time frame, right? Because my GPS getting set to this place, this EMIC where this EMIC contract was, I'm being followed, all these other events. But next up, we're going to start getting into where it seems like there was a honey trap set, where they very reasonably could have sent somebody to gather information on me. Yeah, we're going to get into some really, really fun topics here. Because soon after, you'll notice that the second EMIC contract starts to match the location close to me. And this starts to get much more personalized. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to take a moment and talk about Stephen McNeil. And I'll speak to him directly. Mr. McNeil, I really respect you. And I know this isn't going to turn out well for me, and I know what you people are going to do and what you people probably already have done. And that's too bad because, like, as a man and seeing what you've done for this province, I had a lot of respect for you. A lot of respect. I don't pretend your job is easy. You're going to face massive amounts of ridicule, and that's partly why I did that test about talking about, black people and stuff can be racist too. It's because, like, you're the one who's going to be attacked by all these people, not me. And I wanted to understand what these people were like, and they were just monsters. They were out for a witch hunt. They would have gone after Jim. They would have gone after you. They just wanted to terrorize somebody. I watched them try to destroy a man's life, a gay man's life who had mental illness, running a restaurant because he had the different flags of all kinds of different people, and he put one up, all Lives Matter. And they were literally talking about how they're going to ruin his life and how good it is. I couldn't believe that kind of monster, right? It says something about the world. That kind of hate's not reserved for whites, blacks, gays, straights. It's a disease of humanity, and we all need to watch it. And I knew that kind of hate would target you. And how responsible now is it for me to judge somebody like you have done so much for the province? We're in the middle of a goddamn pandemic. You're the right man for the job. I don't care what anybody says. When that pandemic come, I was grateful as fuck that you were the Premier. Right? You came out, people listened to you. Good job. Good job. And I didn't think it was responsible for me to keep going or to do anything. I never did want to bring this out. That's why I said have somebody contact me. Right? That's why I waited until you were well out of office, because it was only right for you to be able to do what you felt you wanted to do. And it shouldn't be pressured by me or any of those other factors. These individuals should get to see what's in your heart, what you feel needs to be done as a man. And I do feel you went about doing that. And I hope that you were given enough time. And I hope that you don't just see this as disrespect or me judging you. I don't pretend this was easy decisions here or there. And please recognize my situation in this. I was lost. I don't have family support, man. I don't have anybody or anything. I'm out here looking after disabled women, and it's stressful as hell. My family won't help me with anything. They have never. It's all just a lie. I laid on the floor and begged and cried and pleaded and I begged them to help. They just wouldn't. So, so if you wonder about me and like what I'm dealing with, like I understand what that's like to be the person that just has to take it. Right? I understand that at least. And when I look, I want every single person watching this to understand that I do not think in any way that Stephen McNeil's a racist. I don't think that. There's nothing inside of me that... nothing. Right? He's a premier. That man worked hard. He did a lot for this province. He deserves respect, and he deserved the time to finish up his term without anybody bothering him. Or a bunch of fucking idiots on some witch hunt. Okay? So... I think there is a lot more to add in there. And again, I said I'm going to do a side video to add in all the fun stuff. Because, we've got conspiracy theories with Black Cube, with different executives from Postmedia, and then executives from EMIC and SCL Group. Like, there's like this really interesting backstory that could have been occurring. But I just want to focus more so on those fundamentals, right? So, and what's important here is, like, before I finish up, is, Stephen McNeil was brothers with Robin McNeil, who was the chief of police at the time my wallet was taken, and, would have been the chief when Jim would have gotten his transfers, but also would have been there when they said it was disingenuous to apologize, and so then the 19th looks a little less, it looks disingenuous itself, right? So... that's more so like why they're all related. And if you look inside the Conflict of Interest Act, it clearly says brothers, right? So, and all these people were objectively involved, all these high-ranking people, and this would have gone back to Halifax Regional Police because, like I said, Jim was working there. So all these connections and stuff are very reasonable and very logical. Any reasonable person would be able to see that, which is what's so important for August 2022 when they did their false arrest. So, what we're going to do is I'm going to leave it there. I think that was a pretty good video. And yeah, so thank you everybody for watching, and have a good day.